What's up, y'all? Adam Hoots here, the lean builder, Hoots on the ground with no bullshito. And today I got my man, Mr. James Glass, with us. Mr. James, say what's up to the people.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Yes, sir. I've not been this excited for a podcast in a long time. I've gotten to know you through the old dog lean coffees that we've been doing, and you are just full of wisdom. And I'm excited to explore some of that today. But before we get too deep into the wisdom, let's just talk a little bit about who is James Glass? What makes you up?
I don't know about full of wisdom. I might be full of something, but not wisdom, maybe. Uh, I'm a senior project superintendent. I've been a superintendent for, oh, goodness, going on maybe 25 years. I started as a laborer and worked my way up to carpenter, became a union journeyman carpenter, and worked my way up through the trades to foreman, general foreman, to superintendent. And between that and the oil field and the military, I learned a lot of leadership stuff and Boy Scouts, a lot from Boy Scouts. I'm still involved in Boy Scouts at 60, and I enjoy it even though I don't have a son in it anymore. That kind of got me to where I'm going. Plus, my father, I have a twin brother who lives in New York City, looks exactly like me. Daylight, that's where the similarities stop. He's completely different than I am. And I had a younger sister, and my father was a captain in the Air Force, and he raised us to be in charge and to meet the world head on. And that's got me where I'm at today. So now I'm enjoy what I do. I do large commercials. Right now I'm building a data center in Oklahoma City, and look forward to every day to each challenge and try to solve it.
Amen. So tell me about that journey a little bit, coming up from a laborer to having all these different roles. What was that like? How long did it take? Would you do it again? Let me in here.
I actually had my first construction job when I was first paying construction job when I was 13 because I actually worked for my father before that. Didn't get paid. He says I got paid every time I stuck my feet under the table, but I didn't get a paycheck. But worked for a house builder when I was 13, the weekends, summers, doing cleanup, carpenter's helper. Did that until I graduated high school, went in the oil field, and till the bottom fell out of it a couple of years later and went back to construction. So started as a laborer, even though I knew how to do a lot of carpenter stuff. I was not a carpenter. So laborer and did that off and on, did a stint in the military and came back and decided that I needed to do something more than just be a laborer. So I went joined the carpenters union and when I was about 32 and went through a brief apprenticeship because I already had experience and became a carpenter and worked as a carpenter. And then, but most of my career, even when I was an apprentice, I worked as a foreman. So most of my career as a carpenter, I went from like laborer to brief carpenter to foreman then. And I spent a lot of time as foreman. More of my skills were more to organization and leadership and planning and know how to do things than actually doing it, I would say. Not that I couldn't do it, but I was better at that. And people recognized it. And that's how I got moved up. And then when I was about late 30s, I started being an assistant superintendent, then worked my way into an hourly superintendent job. And here I am. So it's a 40 plus year journey to get here where I'm at and learned a lot of stuff along the way.
But what advice would you give to somebody who's back in the day? Maybe they're not 13 because I think that's illegal these days. But what if they're 17, 18, just showing up, like waking up sore this morning because of yesterday's work? What advice would you give to them?
I would say get an education. I got to where I'm at because of what I know and what I do and experience. In construction, you got two routes. Like I came up and then you go to college and get a job in management and do that. And both have their pluses and minuses. You have to get a lot of knowledge from a college education, but you don't have the field experience to go do it. So while going to a big name school that has a nice construction big program is good, I would say get an education, but pick a program that gives you more hands-on practical application of what you're learning while you're doing it. Because a lot of the big construction schools teach construction theory, they don't they don't do the hands-on part, or they don't teach more construction science. And I would say go that route, pick a good school, figure out what you want, and possibly then work in the construction business in your summers and things like that, and it'll give you such a better starting point when you actually do graduate, get your degree, and get into the construction business. You'll have a lot better understanding of how things work.
So that's interesting because most people these days are saying, don't go to college. Don't like, you don't need to go to college. But I find it fascinating that your advice is, yeah, go get a degree, but then get some field experience in the same breath.
Sure. College is great at teaching you how to analyze problems and solve problems, not necessarily construction problems. I think that's a if you go through the non-college route, sometimes you don't get quite that education and experience. It takes you a little bit longer to get to it.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think some kind of hybrid of both is the best way to do it.
Amen. I'm excited to. I'm glad I didn't wear my Clemson hat because I feel like you're maybe getting on us a little bit. But in the same breath, they have what's called the Excel yard out there where they're building a building with the students, and they're actually going to be occupying and using that building in future years. So it's pretty impressive. They just laid a slab on grade maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and so they are out there getting the science part of the job here.
Well, cool. I didn't know that about Clemson. They're an enemy school. I'm an LSU fan. Don't pay much attention to Clemson. Sorry about that, but I don't.
Uh, I didn't
And
realize you were with the fake tigers, the faux
oh,
tigers.
my brother who looks like me graduated from LSU, so obviously, and then my father's from Louisiana too, so I have some ties there. But
Yeah,
you know,
it's almost in the blood, huh?
oh yeah, but my mother's from Texas, so I say I got the best of both worlds.
Amen. I love that. I love that. So the show is based on lean building, and we like to get lean builders. Can you take us down maybe your lean journey a little bit here and let us know what that looked like?
Yeah, I work for Turner Construction. I work out of the Dallas business unit and started hearing about lean, 2010 maybe in there. And so we kept hearing about lean and they were doing it on projects. And I was on a good sized project, but obviously smaller, but we're talking about a $300 million project was doing it. And so we kept hearing all the horror stories. Oh, the paperwork, it's terrible. We're just checking the boxes. So nobody has a positive view of it, especially outside the project, because all we hear is the bad stuff. And so we start doing lean trainings. We built the airplane and did some other stuff and went to all these classes. And while it seemed interesting, it's like, why are we doing this? What's it going to get me? I understand what you're trying to say, but this is construction business equivalent to herding cats. And what's it going to get me? What's it going to get me? And so I went to two or three of those trainings over the years and I kept hearing about it. And the first lean project I would say we did out of the Dallas business unit, from my understanding, was not a success at all. It became more about filling out the paperwork and checking the boxes, and it didn't achieve us anything. Rocked on for a few more years, and I got invited to Advancing Lean Boot Camp that's put on by Turner. They get people from around the country and bring them all to one location, spend 5 days of going teaching lean on a project and everything. And I will say that once I went to that, it was like the Bible, the scales were removed from my eyes. All of a sudden, it clicked how it
Mhm.
works, and came back and applied those principles and learned along the way. What the big project that first did it, they forced the project to fit lean. And then again, this is my opinion of what I saw, and that's why it wasn't successful. So when I came back in the first project that I did it on, I was the only person on our staff who had done lean at that point, or that training at that point. And obviously, I was leading the group. Of course, the superintendent should be leading it anyway. I think with a lot of support from the project manager and the rest of the team. And we picked the things that we deemed would make us successful. And so that's what we did. We didn't do some of the lean, we didn't do the whole lean program, but we did last planner and applied it and modified it in ways and made it successful. And so the first real attempt of me doing it was a success. I had 5 exterior wall and exterior buildings trade partners that had never even heard the word lean. And so we came in and we taught them how to do it, grouchy old superintendents and crusty people like that. And what we did was took all the things that I had learned, brought in the outside person to help us on our journey, and taught them what it meant and showed them where it could make them successful. And so by the time I finished the exterior wall and all the curtain wall and everything like that, we were on schedule, ahead, got everything done. The trade partners were talking to each other. They were giving me problems 6 weeks out. They would walk by and tell you, hey, the brick guy would walk by and tell the window guy he had a problem. when he was doing his layout that he discovered. So they would trade it back and forth. So made it successful and convinced 5 trade partners that never heard of it before that lean was the way to go. And now I've taken and applied that for each project as we go along. Again, modified to each project because each project's just like individuals. It's unique. It's different. So you got to add and choose what you put in there and what makes it work. Sometimes you got to force some of it to work because you have some basic tenets of lean that you need to stick with. But had a moderate amount of success, but never had as much success as I did that first one. And so that's like my gold standard now. I'm trying to get back to that on every project and try to do that. So it's been an interesting journey. I know it makes the job successful. I like to say, though, some of the things that Lean did, a good superintendent was already doing. We just didn't formalize it. The biggest difference is I did all this stuff individually with each trade partner, walking them through their stuff, getting their buy-in. They get to have their say, but we didn't do it together in a room. So now what Lean taught me how to do was get it together in a room and do it all together, and each week do it each day as we go along.
Yeah, you're a rarity. I think you probably already know that, but I think most of us who have gone on this lean journey, the first time we experienced some roughness, right? You even said one of Turner's first jobs experiencing it was not all that successful. In fact, I'm writing my thesis right now on why typically lean is not successful on the first implementation and what that looks like, how that dampens the industry's opinion of lean, because there are some very mixed opinions out there. I just want to congratulate you for setting that standard on your first one because that is a rarity for sure.
Well, thank you. I think one of the mistakes we make as an industry, as typical of most training, we're going to train you for 4 hours and feed you lunch and send you home, and you're trained. That difference of the 5 days of immersed in it, because they wouldn't even let you answer your phone from your project. You wanted you to pay attention. They said make sure you got your project covered when you show up because we want you to pay attention to what's going on. That 5 days of immersion, especially with you're sitting at the table with 8 people you may or may not know. I only knew 2 people at the table that I was at, and there's 50 people in the room doing this. We all got it up into groups. I think that's what made the difference. 4 hours is great, but it's not enough for you to change your bias that you already have when you come in the room or what you believe or things like that. I think that was what made the greatest difference is when Turner went to doing the lean boot camp, and everybody in the field now has to go to it at some point in their career.
Nice. I think what you're talking about is like a mind shift. It's a total mental model reverse. We're not beating or yelling or screaming at trades anymore. We're working with them to figure out how we're going to get this thing done. And that's huge. You said something a little bit ago. You said we did not implement the full lean system, but we did implement the last planner system. And that sparks a ton of questions in my head. And I know that lean is much, much bigger than last planner system. How would you define lean as a system? Or what are those parts or pieces that you didn't implement or in lieu of the last planner system? Like what else is out there?
Some of it was, oh goodness, the 5 ways.
The 8
We
ways?
Yeah, 8 ways.
Yes, sir.
We didn't implement it right away. So that's the other problem we had. We figured was we bomb them with everything at once. So so what we did is we started with last planner and the small parts of it, and then expanded it to full last planner. Got them on board with that, showed them success, and then it was probably a little bit later in the job than we should have done it, though. We did some of it along the way. We started implementing the 8 ways because part of the other problem we have is we bomb the trade partner. Oh, I've taught you all these things. Why aren't you doing them? And I taught you in 2 days, so you ought to be an expert now. So I wouldn't say we didn't implement them all, but we implemented them in phases. And then, like, I think I call it an observation circle, but I think it's called the Ono circle. We did that later along the way, things like that. And I refused. That was my one thing about lean is I refused to use Japanese words. So I use American words. So we use the observation circle. But so we implemented it later, maybe 3/4, 2/3, 3/4 of the way into the project. It worked it pretty good because that's when I needed it. I had an electrician, couldn't get out of the ceiling. So we do the observation circle and finally showed them a way to be more productive. Things like that. We didn't preach the system as a whole, I guess is probably a better way of putting it than we didn't. But there may have been some other things, some minor things that we all do not, along the way that we didn't implement because the last planner was the focus. It's just like anything in life you want to get somebody to do, you got to sell it. So the way to sell it was to sell last planner and show them that they could be successful, make more money, get ahead of schedule, get buy-in into what's going on, not me standing there preaching. And so once I'd got those things done, then we would expand it into the other things. That's probably a better way to describe it.
I like it. Tell me this, what was the hardest part of your transition from that traditional, what you had been taught, and into this new kind of lean builder role? Like, what was the hardest part of that transition?
To be patient and let it come to fruition. I'm superintendent, military, raised that way. Let's take the bull by the horns. I'm in charge. I'm going to solve this problem. So you got to give it time to come to let it work. And knowing when to apply the hammer and when not to apply the hammer.
Tell me
I
more about that.
There's 5 different styles of leadership. When we in the construction business, superintendents gravitate to authoritative because it's just easier to stand there and pound on the desk and tell somebody what to do. And it's your fault you didn't comply, not mine, because I told you. And figuring out what each person takes. I did some of this along the way, but always defaulted to the authoritative. So it was having the patience to let which style of leadership come out. Because some people had one, I had a iron worker that I finally figured out that he wanted me to come by every morning so we could get in a 10-minute heated argument, screaming and cussing, kicking each other. And once we did that, he would do anything I wanted after that.
Just
But we had to go through the screaming match every morning. And then I had another guy that if I so much as even raised my voice, he was in the truck gone back to his office. So I had to learn, can't raise my voice. If I was aggravated about something else, I had to put it out of my mind to talk to him to get what I wanted. Having the patience to learn all these things, when to apply them. I'm on a project right now. I've got my assistant superintendent has worked with me several times, and I used to be quite volatile. I've kicked a hard hat or two across the job and kicked over a portalet one time or two in my career, throwing a temper. And I had this big old 300-pound underground guy get in my face. He was a sub tier of a sub tier, and he was trying to do something that was not very fair to who he was contracted to, and I stepped in and said, "Hey, we don't need you don't need to do that." When this guy got right up in my face, the toe to toe thing, and I'm like, "Calm down. You need to back off. We need to talk about this calmly." And my assistant superintendent's like sitting there with a bag of popcorn waiting for me to pop. When he goes, "Wow, you've changed." Because in the old days, yeah, you would about took about 2 seconds of that. I never lost my temper, proved my point. The next day, the guy comes back and apologizes to me, and I eventually got what I wanted out of the situation. So having the patience to get through a situation, not lose control, and but then there's sometimes that you just have to be the authoritative guy and pound the desk, not kick anything over anymore. Maybe the worst thing you can do is pound the desk a little bit, but you can't kick hard hats anymore or kick portalets over when things like that. So learning to do that, learning the hardest part was me changing myself, not changing other people because and coming to the realization that I can't change other people. I can only control me and I have to convince them they want to need to change themselves. And that's the hardest part, learning to do all that. Because we manage 3 things in the construction business. We don't build nothing anymore. As construct general contractors and
no,
construction managers, we manage money, we manage risk, and we manage relationships. As much as big old tough guys like to talk about, we have a relationship with everybody on the project. And you got to learn to manage that correctly. And that usually takes care of number 2 and number 3, money and risk.
I like that a lot. So we manage 3 things in construction: money, risk, and relationships, with the relationships being the most important, it sounds like.
And sometimes the most difficult.
Yes, definitely. So I'm going through this learning patience, learning that control is an illusion right now. And at best, we can just influence people. Any advice for me as I'm going through this process? How did you learn it? Or did you just experiment? Give me some advice here, Mr. Glass.
Well, I was so coming up through Boy Scouts as a kid and then as an adult and then in the army they teach you the same thing, a little bit different approaches. You as a squad leader, which is your real first leadership position, you have 2 jobs: complete your mission, take care of your people. 90% of the time, if you take care of 2, number 1 will always happen a lot easier. So anyway, having a good platform of understanding what leadership is and different roles and different things you got to apply. And then it becomes a matter of just like everything else in life, you got to experience and you got to apply the knowledge you've learned now. And when you make a mistake, you got to make a correction. Don't keep doing the same old thing the same old way.
Mm.
And also be open that every job, every person, every trade partner is different. It's not all reliable. Even the people you've worked with before, from project to project, they've changed. You need to be attuned to what's going on. You need to know your people, and you just not to know them, but you got to what's going on with you and your kids today, things like that. We had a he's now a vice president for Turner. He was a general superintendent. He built a huge hotel out in California. Came and talked to us here in Texas. Invited him in. We have a superintendent roundtable. But anyway, one of the things that people say about him a lot is well, I had like 700 workers on this job. He could probably tell you half of them's name because he goes by and talks to them. Things like that. Just knowing somebody's name and that you ask about what their kid's baseball game they went to yesterday. Just knowing people like that helps a lot. And I'm terrible with names. I call my son Boy because I can't remember his name, and he's named after me. Uh, so I'm terrible with names. So I've made a point that I try to really pay attention when somebody tells me their name so I can remember it. I've even written their names down, things like that. Like our fellow employees, when I meet their spouse or significant other, I'll put their name under their contact information in my phone because I'm terrible. So doing things like that, learning people, knowing the different types of leadership, what they are, and what, then going out and learning how to apply them, I would say is the best advice.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And I guess when it comes to names and knowing people, that's one of my favorite parts of the job. And I feel like I'm really good at that. But I'll add this that it's got to be genuine because
Hmm.
people are smart. People know when you're being authentic and when you're just trying to get something from them. And I think a lot of times in construction, we need something done and we just, hey, how are you? What's your name? Can you do this for me? And it doesn't work that way, right? If we're talking
Yeah.
about truly building a relationship with somebody, that means you're genuinely interested and you care about that person.
Other advice I would give is even when you don't want something, come by and ask their name. And if there's not a problem, just come by and say hi and stay out of their hair. A lot of people like to pick at the scab, come by, and even though things are going by, they keep pounding on it. I'm like, just come by. How are you today? Hey, where are you from? I'm working in Oklahoma, but from Texas, and we have a lot of people travel back and forth. So I ask them where they're from and where they live and things like that, and it makes them feel more comfortable, puts them at ease. So therefore, you can be at ease with them.
Yeah, I like that. That's huge. Don't just go to people when you need something. Amen. Do you know the other? You mentioned the authoritative style of leadership. Are you familiar with the other four? I think you said there were five different.
Now there's consensus, which is ruled by committee, which I've have to say I've never been a fan of, and I've not seen being successful a lot because,
The
huh?
United States government, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then, gosh, you had to ask me. I don't know I can't recall them right now, but it's a combination of
There you
obviously
go.
I forget what it's called, the one where you get everybody's buy-in, but you still make the decision. Input, I think, is what it is.
So I just looked them up here. We got authoritative, participative, which I think
Yeah,
is the consensus one, the delegative, laissez faire,
yeah,
transactional, and transformational.
yeah.
Uh, and I just found those through a quick Google search. I think that's interesting. I would love to dive into that a little bit more and understand more about those because you're right. Everybody is different, and you've got to be able to adapt your leadership style based on who you're dealing with.
Sure. One of the things my father always said is, and I've read it in other places too, was I don't have to know how to do everything. I just have to have people that know how to do everything. So it's getting good people around you too, and then being able to lead them and figure out what motivates them and things like that. Some people like to be delegated to. Some people like to be told what to do, and some like to be changed. The transformational one. I mentioned my assistant superintendent. He's in the transformational mode right now. He's not an assistant. He's a regular superintendent, but I'm helping him transition to become a project superintendent and run his own job. We're more in a transitional mode now. I'm more giving advice and mentoring type leadership with him instead of telling him what to do. One, I don't have to tell him what to do because he knows what to do, but now it's more of refining him to where he's going to be able to take over that role, hopefully the next project.
Got you. So I'm going to dive back to Mr. James Glass real fast because we're starting to get into some of that wisdom.
Oh boy.
Tell me, what are you passionate about? What things get you fired up and ready to go?
In life or what?
Yes.
Very involved in my church. In fact, we are looking at starting a major renovation and addition to church. So I'm going to be the project manager, not the superintendent. I'll be the
Ooh,
project manager for the church. So helping them doing that. Really enjoy doing that. Finally getting to use some of my skills in life actually at my church. So passionate about that. Passionate about Boy Scouts. Still involved after I've got 35 years in Boy Scouts. My boy's 35, and I haven't had anybody in my family in Scouts, none of my kids in Scouts for 20 years almost, and but I'm still in it, still involved in it, and I have a job in Scouts that allows me to do the fun stuff and be involved with the youth, and not so much all the work stuff. So enjoy that. Passionate about that. Big avid hunter, deer hunter, being in
okay.
Texas, and then of course my wife and family. Those are probably the passionate things I am about in life.
I love that. I'm gonna have to come visit you and do some deer hunting, man. I've never been, believe it or not.
Really? And you're
Yeah.
from South Carolina? You live in South
Well,
Carolina?
from Florida for the most part, but I do live in South Carolina. Yeah, shame on me.
So I got to spend time in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So that's
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't get to come do the touristy thing there though. So it was a nice place as I ran by every day.
Well, when you want to come do the touristy thing, you hit me up. You bring mama, you bring whoever you want. We'll show you a good
Sure,
time.
sure.
I absolutely love the transition from old school or old dog, as I'll call it, into this new lean builder. I'm curious, how do you think we can convert more people into this new way of building things?
Oh goodness. I have to say, old school is sitting right there on my shoulder every day, wanting to come out. You know,
Okay. How do you
you know,
keep it going?
again, learned along the way how to change and what's successful, and at the same time telling myself when the 300-pound guy's in my face, that's not the way to do it. That's not what you're supposed to do. Doing the right thing, setting the bar for myself, doing the right thing is, I guess, how I did. Uh, Again, like we keep saying, you have to show people where it's successful, and that's what we've like on my job here. I had a lot of trade partner people that didn't have experience with it and have just showed them where it makes them successful. Had some struggles along the way because on this job, more that might be more personality related than actual the functions of lean. But again, different people, different projects, different. Everybody comes to the meeting with their part. It's just our biggest part. We've got the planner part down on this job. Our problem is implementation.
Mm,
So had some struggle from there. So it's been coaching them, trying to get them to implement their plan is what we've been focused on here. While they've see the benefits of it, I haven't been able to show them so much the successes of it because one of the problems too is their support from their offices is not quite like it is where I've done some other projects here because I have to say this part of Oklahoma doesn't hardly do any lean. It's not had a lot of exposure to it, so it's probably been a harder journey because of that. So again, it was just sticking with it, even when it doesn't seem like it's going well, or you're not getting where you want to go. Sticking with it, keeping after it, and showing people how it can be successful. Successful, but also you have to live the example too. A big part of lean is respect for people. And so when it's on fire, me not losing my temper and things like that, and I've learned over the years, we had an issue going on the current project 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was right at the start of my weekly make ready meeting, and I was ramping up. I could feel it coming. The bomb was coming, and again, Eddie's sitting over with a bag of popcorn waiting for the show. And as I get right up to the peak, I'm going like, I can't do this. And I end up in my head, talked myself down and got back on a better footing before we continue with the rest of the meeting. In the old days, I wouldn't have to do that. For me personally, the change is I have to watch myself. But again, you have to show people successes. You have to be persistent about it without being a nag about it.
mm,
You constantly have to be respectful to the people that are there, and you have to just stick with it and show people where it helps. Even if you may have to change from big steps to little steps. And hey, we'll champion a win on a half day basis versus a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or even sometime a minute by minute. You say, hey, reinforce it when something good happens with that trade partner. Again, nobody, I can change nobody. All I can do is influence people, as you said, and you have to live it. That's the biggest thing. Like you said earlier, people see actions louder than words, and you have to can't just preach it and then not go do it yourself. And then reinforce my team. Obviously, I don't do all this stuff by myself. I've got a MEP engineer, a project manager, a superintendent, and an engineer. Everybody has to be on the same page. If we're getting off a little bit, then we have to have a little internal regroup. And obviously, and I'm also up until my MEP superintendent came, I was 20 years older than everybody too. It's like granddad or pop here or whatever you want to call it. I have it's my responsibility as the older, more experienced one to make sure everybody's doing it, make sure they have all the resources, and make sure we're all pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I'm struggling with on a current project as well is, hey, we'll go in the trailer or in the field office and we will plan until our heart's content. And man, it's such a great plan. But then when you go out to the field and it comes to the execution side, people really are struggling. And you mentioned the Ono circle earlier, or the observation circle, or as I call it, the oh yes circle.
Yeah.
That's a pet peeve of mine when people go and walk the project, because I think you should be standing in a project. You can't really see much if you're just walking by people working. But when you sit there and analyze them and you're able to like really get to know what they're doing and their process, then you can start to make the work better for an individual. My question to you is, when we're struggling with the execution, but our planning is on point, is there a problem with the planning, or how would you go about rectifying that?
Several things. One, so we say it's last planner. Make a big deal about it. Their PM will show up to the meeting, not the foreman. I said, I want the foreman in here. But then the PM will leave. I don't need to be here if the foreman's here. And I think when people struggle with their execution, that's when you do need the additional, maybe the general superintendent or the PM in there as well, because some of it is support from their office. Well, that's not how we do things. So you have
Mhm.
to, it's a last planner addition, an addition to last planner. So that's one way. One of the problems I had on my project was one of my trade partners changed their superintendent. I've been telling them for 2 months he is not the guy, and trying to convince their office that he was not the guy. And up until that, I thought he was the guy. Also, is it really the right thing to tell somebody to remove somebody or do something? Things like that. So deciding the right time. So I've been telling them for 2 months, and finally, a month ago, or 3 weeks ago, they replaced him. Instant, his crew instantly transformed. So he was a roadblock. So you got to identify the roadblocks, and he was a major roadblock because he kept saying, "Oh, I'm telling them what to do. I'm letting them plan their work." He wasn't telling. He had never given one target date they had to be done, like in a room. You got to be done Thursday the 26th this day with this room. Never did that. Instantly brought a new guy in who is drinking from the fire hose in the last 3 weeks, trying to figure out what's going on. But he just had good leadership skills to begin with, identify bad things like that. Just him doing that, getting him, it was like in 2 days' time, his whole morale of his whole crew changed, everything like that. You got to identify the people that are roadblocks and either re-educate them or tell them we don't need you. Keep dragging them through it because it's not going to be successful. They're going to be unhappy. You're going to be unhappy, and you're not going to get what you want. But I'm not advocating getting rid of people. But that's a very rare thing. But
If you can't change the people, right?
yeah, or get them help, show them where they need help, and tell them
Right.
and help them plan the help. And then I think the other thing is it gets down into the microcosm here, and it's a pain to do, and it takes a lot of time. You have to just go out and show them, spend the day with our crew, and show them, here's your plan. What are you doing? And start working through maybe a huge modified Ono circle of working through with it. And when we do the observation circle, we don't do the job walk thing. We pick one activity and we pick a bunch of people to do it outside of that trade, and we sit there and nobody asks them questions. And you might ask them a question of what they're doing, but nobody tells them what to do, and you write it all down and you go on and you work a plan up with them. First time I ever did it was two electricians putting up lighting hardware. They both had a ladder They have to come down the ladder, go get their parts, come back up, take forever to do it, drag the ladder around. All you got to do is give them an apprentice, or well, the plan, I didn't, but the plan worked out, give them a helper. So they got to stay on the ladder. He hands them the parts back and forth, and they're like, doubled their speed of getting done. So you got to show them things like that, not just walk through the job like you said, because no, that doesn't do anybody good. I can what we call seagull management, come by, fly by, and shit on it and keep going. That never helped anybody.
And it's common practice in the industry too.
Oh yeah, it's easy to come in and do the 5-minute assessment. Tell me what all my problems are. Yeah, you don't even have a clue. So again, being persistent, being patient, helping them identify problems, helping them solve problems. It's just a lot of time management and a lot of individuals sometimes. Obviously, the ones that are being successful, you don't have to spend as much time with, but you still got to reinforce them and not forget about them while you're dealing with the other crews too. And getting them to talk to the other trade superintendents and foremen. That's probably one of the biggest things I found helps. Even though, and so like on this job, they were talking to each other, but they were just talking to each other. They weren't really solving problems. So getting them to get in the room together, the electrical guy with the drywall guy, and just get them to start the conversation and step back out of the way and let them talk, and then make a nudge here and there and things like that. It's just sticking with it and knocking off the little stuff is how to make it execute better.
So, what would you say to somebody that just blatantly says, James, this lean stuff is bullshito. It failed on my first job. It failed on my second job, and I'm not doing that shit anymore. What would you tell that person?
So, like we do in, you can't tell them anything.
Never heard that one before, have you?
Yeah. So in Boy Scouts, we call them leading them to the solution. Instead of me telling them what the solution is, we start asking leading questions that let them
Ooh.
come to the solution themselves. Is the best way I've found because, again, I don't like people telling me what to do. So why would anybody want me telling them what to do? And try to just lead them to it or ask them why it wasn't successful. Why do you don't think it works? And then start knocking their answers off. It takes a relationship to get to the solution and change them. If you get down to it, most people want to be heard and have a say and have a say in what goes on because they have skin in the game. If you tell them what to do, they're responsible, but yet they get to have no say, and that makes them resistant. If I'm gonna get hammered for this, I want control. So one, you got to give them the control is a little bit of an illusion, but two, you got to figure out what their needs are and what their hesitations are, and try to address it. I've found no one has categorically said, "I'm not doing it." If you sat there and have the conversation with them, if you get into it, it may not even be what you think it is. What the problem is, it may be some minute thing over here, or maybe the guy just wants to vent because the last superintendent did whatever to him and he didn't get to have a say or that this is why I'm upset. And you become the stand in for that other superintendent for him to vent to. Sometimes it's stuff like that. There is no magic bullet for any of this. It's all about working the relationship.
I agree 100%. And unfortunately, for the first 15, 20 years that lean has existed in the construction industry, I think it's been more about the tools and the concepts and
Sure.
less about the people. And we're seeing that shift in the prioritizing of relationships now, which is not easy in construction because again, that classical approach is yell, scream. I've never heard the kick porta johns over, but yeah, I could see that, especially if that 300-pound man's in there. Who no, but yeah, I think that we're seeing that more of an influence on people and less convincing people that leans the way and more just listening to them and asking them the right questions in order for them to self-discover. Not solutionizing them, right? Not solution shanking them with, hey, here's this lean stuff, just use it, here you go. But more, hey, what's the problem? Or why don't you like these open-ended questions is certainly the way. I love where you're going with that.
I would say more in my age group too, 45 and up. One of the things that I was resistant to is, oh, this neat Japanese system, Japan, and I found that age group that when you start talking about that, something from a foreign country, people are resistant to it just because it came from a foreign country. So we don't talk a lot about the Japanese portion or how it got started with Toyota and things like that. We focus on hey, this is what it's going to do for you, not what it did for somebody else. This is what it's going to do for you. And so that helps a lot too. So,
I like that advice. In fact, that's the reason Buddy and I got together and wrote that Old Dog Lean Thesaurus, because
yeah,
it felt like there was some hesitation with all these Japanese words, and you want me not just to learn a new way to build, but now a new language. Forget it. That's too much. And
yeah,
in reality, the great superintendents are likely already using some of these lean principles.
sure. And then the other thing I would say is important too. Don't be afraid to learn something from somebody that just graduated from college too.
More than just technology, right?
Yeah. Even doesn't matter what it is, predominantly it's technology now, but if somebody shows you a better way, I will say that's one of the things I've always, for me personally, is I don't know everything. I'll be the first one to tell you I don't know everything, but I can listen to people that do know, are experts on that whatever we're talking about, and I'd be stupid not to listen to them and take their advice on it. Even when I ran a crew, if there was time, sometimes there wasn't time, but a lot of times I would get my more experienced carpenters to give me an input on what they thought because they probably built something I haven't built. And it was my responsibility to make the decision and set the plan, but I would be stupid not to use all my resources. So don't be afraid to learn from other people, especially somebody that's younger than you.
I love that advice. In fact, I tell people that on job sites, like, don't be afraid to learn from your trade workers, right? Like, learning doesn't always have to be technical. You can learn something about that person, like you mentioned earlier,
Sure.
where they're from, who they know, like all of that's important, and it's a form of learning. Tell me this: what's a word or phrase that just drives you nuts?
There's a lot of them. You have to put me on the spot. I'm more of the in the flow deal. I like it when people say in my mind, and I always want to go, whose else mind would it be? Why do you add that to the start of something? In my mind, it's not what's in mine; it's what's in yours because you're saying it. I'll have to think on that one. We may have to circle back to that one.
That's all right. We can do that. We'll oh no circle. We'll oh yes circle back to it.
Okay, this really irritates me, and I've actually had a little dissertation on a little bit of it this month already. I need to know when you're done, not when you say you're done and then going to be done, because there's no such thing as done and done. You're either done or you're not. Done and done drive me crazy. We're done. Then you go on there. We're not done. No, you're not done. I can't close you out on the schedule. If you're not, can't walk away from this room 100%. I'm ready to punch it. You're not done. So I don't want to hear if you're done or done. You're done.
The
That's
old
probably
DD, the old DDFD, right?
yeah,
Done, finally done, or something like
yeah.
that.
It drives me bananas. You're not done.
I like that. That was a good one. We're coming down towards the end of it, but I want to know who has made the biggest impressions on James's life or career, or let's shout some people out here, folks that you've worked with, or just folks that have had an impact on making you who you are.
Oh wow. Obviously my father, Jim Glass. And then the first guy I ever worked for, the house builder, his name's Sonny Ramsey. He's gone now, but him and another guy that actually lived across the road from him owned a commercial construction business. I worked for him on and off a couple times. Carl Klossner. He's still alive and kicking down in Louisiana. Definitely for those two people. If it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be where I am today. And then who else? The list is just so long. I'm no longer a union carpenter, but I would not be where I am today without joining the carpenters union. Was there 15 years. I was president of the local in North Texas for 8, but it expanded and moved on. But definitely wouldn't be where I was without the carpenters union. But a guy named Charlie Campo and another guy named Earl Thomas helped me a lot there. And then obviously there's a plethora of people at Turner Construction: Mike Hechtman, Lonnie Satsky, Tom Kempen, Joe Hudler. The list could go on and on. Another guy I know works up in Iowa now, Joe Bailey, works for us. Just a lot of people. Jonathan Smith, lots of people. Learned from all of them.
I
John
love
Berg.
it. Yeah, keep going, man. Please.
Oh goodness. And the problem is I'll probably leave somebody out. Got my longtime labor foreman that worked, or carpenter foreman that worked for me. He passed away this summer. His name Pedro Luna. Learned lots from him. He was younger than me, not that much younger, but learned a lot of stuff from Pedro and things, and just a lot of people along the way.
Man, I love that. I could see as you started naming people, you just sparked up and got a little bit of energy. That was cool to watch. Yeah.
And of course, number one, my wife, Patricia Glass.
Amen. Yeah. You have to say that one though, right?
Yeah, but I want to say that one, even though I have to.
I love it. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. All right. What else did we miss before I hit you with the last question here?
I don't know. We're all over the map.
Yeah, we covered a lot for sure. But what's next for you, James? What's coming up? What's on the horizon for James Glass?
Oh, I don't know. I'm hopefully going back to Texas to work. I'm finishing my job here in Oklahoma about end of the year, hopefully, and then back to Texas. And but just I'll be 61 this year. So the question is, how long am I going to do it? I guess it's probably the biggest. What's next? Going to do at least till I'm 66, probably. But even talking about maybe going to 70 because I want to do some things monetarily with my salary before I retire. And I feel like I can do that, but keep bigger and better projects, moving on, learning, just trying to be a better superintendent and a better person on the job and taking care of people and treating people right. And maybe, people often wonder what their legacy is going to be and things like that. My brother works in HR, so he has no monuments to his legacy other than people, maybe. But while I can drive by and say, hey, I would tell my grandkids I worked on that building, I did this, probably that used to be what I was inspired me some, but now it's more how many years after I'm gone, what I've done with all these people I worked with, will it resonate with them? Will it resonate onto their career and to the people they work for in the future? So how much is it going to pay for the influence I have on people? I guess is where I've reached my stated place in life, being an old man now. And that kind of drives me. Yeah, I'd like people to remember me positively and things like that.
Well,
Hopefully have a lasting influence on somebody.
well, amen. You've had a lasting influence on me. I can tell you that. And this podcast will be forever monumented in the omniverse. No, I do. I appreciate all of you, like your participation in the Old Dog Lean Coffees. You truly bring a ton of wisdom to those conversations. You make them better. I'm very grateful for that. And I know the other folks in the community are as well. So thank you for that. I one last question for you, and you take it out, take it away. This is your mic drop moment. What do you want to tell that next industry? You said legacy before. Like, what is the legacy of James Glass, and what is the message that you want to live on forever?
Oh boy. That he treated me right, that he taught me something and I still use it today and I miss working with that guy. Too bad he's still not here.
Amen. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you, James. I appreciate your time this morning. You are undoubtedly a lean builder for sure. And I appreciate you just making a profound impact on the industry because, damn, we need it.
Well, I enjoy your our lean dog thing, our old dog thing, because it applies to superintendents. And not a lot of things apply to superintendents as a group. We're involved with other groups, but this one's directed at superintendents, and I really enjoy it. And I really enjoy talking to. I feel like I know Cecil from somewhere. We may have crossed paths somewhere before, but it's interesting to hear everybody's perspective and differences and similarities. And I do every once in a while I hear another gym in there that I'll go, hey, let's go try this. So I do take what I hear there and try to apply it too.
Love it. Thanks for coming on and being transparent, vulnerable, and yeah, on we go, man.
Okay,
That's just,
cool. Glad
just
you
what
had me.
that's just what lean builders do.